Have you ever thought about where thoughts come from? And not thoughts like, ooh, I'm hungry, or hey, a bird. Like that's just from our sensory input, from our five senses. But real thoughts, deep thoughts, like whenever you get a thought, you're like, where did that even come from? Okay, the way Ishtok Bentov explains this is amazing, and I love it. He knows more about this than anybody else and sees the world and reality from a very zoomed out point of view in relation to consciousness being fundamental. So the way Ishtok Bentov explains our thoughts is like a radio. So our brain is like a receiver and a tuner and an amplifier. Just like a radio has a receiver, a tuner, and an antenna. Our brain, our body, is essentially an antenna. And the way radios work is there's radio waves everywhere, just filling the air, invisible radio waves. And depending on how strong your antenna is, you can pick up more radio waves from further away. And depending on how good quality all your equipment is, you can get better sound and that kind of stuff. But what you have to do is you have to tune to a particular station, that frequency, you pick up that frequency and you can tune into that station. Okay, so your brain's the same way. So the way your brain works is we live in an informational cosmos. This whole world is data based, right? It's all information. And all around us is information. And our brain acts like a receiver and it picks up the information and it amplifies it into a thought. Now, our tuner is tuned to our station, right? We have a station. Each person has a station. That way we're not picking up everyone else's thoughts because there's a lot of information out there, okay? So it's picking up our information. It's connected to our higher self and it's connected to our information field and it's pulling in information and then our brain amplifies those information packets into thoughts. Now, if you have a strong enough antenna, right, meaning you are, connected, you put in the meditation work, you've decalcified your pineal gland, you've done the work, and you are a powerful, strong antenna, you can pick up more information from further out places, right? And especially when you're in a meditative state, when you kind of filter out all the fuzz and all the noise and focus that clear connection, then you can really amplify those, information packets into thoughts. And then when you get really good, you can even focus your intention and direct your antenna to particular places to pick up particular information from different realms, different guides, different, from your higher self, from, you can access like the Akashic Record, the database, all this kind of stuff, right? So think about you and your brain as this antenna, as a receiver. You're receiving information, and then your brain amplifies that information, turns it into thoughts. Now, sometimes things can send you thoughts, okay? That's how, like, sometimes people will just get random thoughts and they're like, I don't know where this genius thought came from, but I'm gonna run with it. People write books and make songs and do all sorts of stuff, and they're like, I don't know where this came from. Well, I can't explain exactly where those come from, but think about it just like information. Sometimes your radio will start picking up weird things and you're just like, there's a voice creeping in the song. I don't know where that came from, right? Sometimes it picks up like radio, like police blotters and that kind of stuff. So it's an antenna and there's information everywhere. So you never really know, like you are tuned to your station, but just like anything, it can get out of tune or maybe your antenna gets a little wonky or whatever. So, but by just thinking about this general concept of this is what thoughts are, it explains a lot because we think thoughts just come from inside our head. But then there's tons of times when you'll have a thought that isn't based on anything that you've seen or read or knew. So you're like, where did this come from? Sometimes it's a thought that's very profound. Like sometimes like you have a problem, an ailment or some sort of issue, and all of a sudden you have a thought that's like the remedy for it. You're like, where did that come from? Well, in most cases, something like that is going to be like either a future version of you or a higher version of you sending that information packet to you. Your brain decodes it basically the same way a radio decodes the radio waves and turns it into songs and music, into sound. Your brain does that, but it turns it into a thought. Okay. And then you have that thought and you're like, hey, I have this thought, right? They don't always come from inside of you. Rarely do your thoughts come from inside of you. Like right now, I can think something like, oh, I'm warm because it's warm outside. That's coming from my central nervous system and my five senses. But when I sit down and think, like when I go in a meditative state or I really think, I try to get creative. I enter that creative space. Like maybe I'm working on a project, I'm making a new logo or something, and I really start thinking, my brain is now tapped into this different field, a different field of creative information. It's tapped into it turned the station, it tuned the dial to a totally different station that's outside of my physical body, right? And that's exciting. and that we can do that anytime we want. And you can tap into these other channels. You can turn the dial to these other channels that are outside of you and access information that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. But it helps to understand this, because then you know that that's possible, okay? So anyways, hopefully that makes sense. Our brain is just a receiver. It's just a giant antenna, and then we have this amplifier inside that takes this data, this information from the field, because everything's information. It turns that information into a thought, and then we act on that thought, or we decide not to. We have the free will to do that. But anyways, that's just what Ishtak Bentov, the amazing Ishtak Bentov, thinks thoughts are and where they originate. Let me know, what do you think? Have a beautiful day. Peace.